The following presentation, Makers and Shakers, is presented by the City of Flagstaff and APS. Sponsored by Compass BBVA, Pub Medical, AWD Law, Sunwest Bank, Alliance Bank, W.L. Gore and Associates, Gentera Enterprises, and DPR Construction.
Hello, I'm Diana White, CEO of Chandler Innovations, an incubator program in the city of Chandler, Arizona, powered by Moonshot at NACET. And it is my great pleasure to formally kick off the second day of Moonshot's Makers and Shakers, a week-long virtual event to educate and celebrate both startups and aspiring founders. I hope both you and your coffee maker are ready for another day of informative and inspiring Moonshot presenters. Today, you will notice our lineup consists of all women instructors and speakers. Similar to yesterday, we will start with 2 workshops touching on key building blocks for creating successful startups. They will each run 45 minutes to an hour. While these workshops are pre-recorded, our Moonshot instructors and subject matter experts will be live and online to address any questions or comments you may have. We also have a special treat following our morning lineup. At 10:30, I will personally be hosting Moonshot's monthly reoccurring We Mean Business program, an hour-long Zoom coffee meetup for Flagstaff's women entrepreneurs and business leaders. You can register for this meeting on our website. Tonight, starting at 5 p.m. to 6:15 p.m., we invite you all to kick back and join us again as we showcase some of the best mission control startup pitches Moonshot has virtually seen and heard this year, as well as pitches showcasing the City of Flagstaff's second annual Innovate Waste and PPE Challenge responders. Tonight, we will conclude with a keynote from Kirsten Hathcock, founder of Mod Mom Furniture, activist, TEDx speaker, and Shark Tank Season 2 winner, and one of Moonshot's entrepreneurs in residence. Her keynote will be followed by a live Q&A with Moonshot's Stephanie Pierotti and you, our at-home viewer. We have a lot of ground to cover, so let's get started.
Welcome everybody. I am so excited to be sharing the next 45 minutes with you today talking about one of my very favorite topics, search engine optimization, or SEO for short. Now, I've had the incredible fortune of having almost a 17-year career in digital marketing. And as you can imagine, there's a whole hell of a lot to learn over 17 years. One of the things I've learned is that digital marketing can be really overwhelming. That's not what we're going to do together today. We're going to keep today as actionable, down to the ground, as impactful as we possibly can for you. So now's a good time to grab a pen, paper, whatever you like to use to take some notes, because this is going to be full of tips and tricks for you to go grow your business and have the impact that you're here for. We're going to jump in with what I call my 3-step SEO jumpstart formula. Now, I mentioned over my 17 years, I've learned a lot about digital marketing. 1 is that it can be really overwhelming. 2 is that there's no shortage of ways to drive traffic to your website. There's Facebook, there's Instagram, there's Snapchat, there's this new thing out there called Parler and TikTok, and deep breath. There is a lot of ways to drive traffic to your site. But if you're here, it's because you're not your average entrepreneur. You're looking for high ROI on your time. You're looking for results that will come for years to come, not flash in the pan revenue. And you're looking for ways to innovate, grow, and continue to create and have your impact. There's only one channel in digital marketing that meets all of that criteria. And it happens to be my favorite one, SEO, search engine optimization. So what is this SEO thing I keep talking about? Well, I like to share a very fun, slightly personal example to explain what SEO is and what SEO is not. This is the best kid ever. This is my godson, Chance, and he is such a soccer fanatic. This kid literally lives, eats, and breathes soccer. In fact, don't judge, he watches YouTube sometimes over dinner, and it's always soccer videos. This kid just loves it. He plays competitive club soccer. He's also a teenager, almost 14 years old, and he's a little bit of a gear junkie, unfortunately for me and my pocketbook. So what does this all mean? This means that this kid needs new soccer gear what feels like every few months. And one of the things he loves to shop for is soccer cleats. Now, let me use this example to explain to you what SEO is not first. All right, so what we have here is a Google search results page for the search soccer cleats. To the untrained eye, this looks like a normal search results page. To the digital marketer, to the entrepreneur, to the small business owner, there's a few really key spots that we can be using to grow our businesses. Let's take a look a little bit deeper. The first spot is what we call the Google Ads space. Now, this used to be called Google AdWords in the day. It's also called pay-per-click, or PPC. And the reason is if I were to click on any one of these ads, that advertiser would have to pay Google for my click. This is how Google makes so much money. This is not what we're talking about today. We're not going to talk about Google Ads because we're looking for those free yet really impactful ways to grow our businesses. I love Google Ads. It's just not what we're going to talk about today. One more thing on Google Ads. We know these are the ad space because there's a tiny little ad label next to every single one of these. Again, along the top of the site and down the right-hand side. What we are talking about today when we talk about SEO is everything else on this Google page. So there's this thing called the map pack. This happens when Google deems that your search has local intent. So Google thinks because my search is soccer cleats that I might want to transact with a business locally. So they're going to show me this map and 3 websites underneath it. I love the map pack for small businesses because on a mobile device when somebody's doing this search, that takes up the whole screen. You can get a ton of clicks to your site by just showing up in these 3 spots. So this is what we're talking about. This is free traffic. And the other space we're talking about on the Google page is everything else below that, the organic results. This also is free, and this also falls under the SEO umbrella. Okay, so we just went through what SEO is and what SEO is not. Now let's start to put some pen to paper here and get real deep into the exact nuts and bolts of SEO. One thing to note, SEO is a very complex topic, or at least it can be. What we're going to do today is give you just the critical SEO knowledge that you need to drive more web and brick and mortar traffic, to overcome your competitors on Google, and to fill your calendar full of appointments if you're in a service-based business, phone calls, and of course, revenue. Again, this is a 3-step SEO jumpstart formula. Let's dive in. Now, before I give you the actual action items here that we need to take, I want you to be able to trust me. Let me show you some of the successes that this formula has helped drive. It's helped drive over $250 million in annual e-commerce revenue for a very popular, very well-known public company. It's also helped create a 300% increase in traffic to over 100 UGG stores. And for small business owners, it's helped do some wonderful things. There's a clothing retailer here in Arizona. She attended one of my workshops where I shared this formula, and she was able to double her business in I think just about 60 days. Now, I'm not here to promise that by doing these 3 things, you're going to double your business, but it's also not out of the realm of possibility. There's also a hypnotherapist that has gone from the page 2 of Google before he attended my workshop to the top of page 1. And he stayed there for the last 11 months. Actually, he stayed there just a little bit longer. It's a little out of date. He stayed there the last 12, I think about 13 months at this point. I've also helped a brand new startup go from 0 to over 500,000 in just their first 6 months in online revenue. And then finally, a well-known sustainability startup has gone from just 5,000 in monthly revenue to 150,000. I don't share any of this to brag or to try to impress you. I share this with you to simply illustrate that if you come meet me in the middle and you come take action on everything I'm gonna share with you, you will have success. It's inevitable. Okay, I'm gonna breeze through these next 2 slides. These are just some illustrations of the successes that some of my students have had. We'll keep on moving though, because I think you get it at this point. All right, now let's start to get into the nuts and bolts. How does this SEO thing actually work? This is where it gets real fun. So first step is Google has these things called spiders. They're also called robots. What these do is they go out and they crawl the entire internet. They crawl the entire World Wide Web. I think that's why they're called spiders. And when they're doing that, they're doing one of 2 things. First of all, they're looking at new information that they don't already know about. They're trying to find that new information. What are those new web pages that have gone live? What are those new businesses that have launched and therefore entire websites that have gone live since they've last crawled? What are those new YouTube videos and Twitter tweets and so on and so forth? They literally are crawling the world's information to find new stuff. And when they do, they need a pretty systematic way to organize that information. The way they organize that information is what we call the algorithm. Everything is powered by algorithms these days. We know Facebook and Instagram have theirs. Google, of course, has its own algorithm. And let me stop here and just illustrate one fact. I think it's going to serve us well when we move forward through these 3 action steps. Google, we covered this already. Google makes money off of its ad revenue. But in order for people to click its ads, they need to have people actually using its search engine. In other words, Google's product is that search engine results page. And it needs to be really highly relevant for us as users if we're going to trust it and if we're going to continue to use it. The more we continue to use it, the more ad revenue Google's going to make. So Google has put a ton of energy, ton of talent, literally the world's geniuses work on this algorithm to make sure this algorithm is better than what Bing can offer or DuckDuckGo or any of these other search engines. And when this algorithm is working the way it should be, man, Google maintains its market share and it makes a ton of money. Okay, so this algorithm is what we need to know as marketers, as business owners. It's what we need to know so that we know what to do in order to get Google on our side. Here's the thing about this algorithm though. There's over 240 different things that we could care about for SEO. In other words, Google has said, hey, here's 240 different things that our algorithm is built on, and that's how we decide how we're going to rank a website. Now, did I just give you a to-do list of 240 different things? No, thankfully. When I do SEO for big brands, we care for about 60 of these factors. For small businesses, there's 5 that I consider to be really mission critical. And what we're going to talk about today are the 3 that are going to give your SEO a really nice jumpstart. All right, let's dive into these 3. The first step that you need to care about, the first action you need to take, is to know what your keywords are. Now, that might be really intuitive for you, but here's the thing. Keywords are essentially the currency. Keywords are what make the SEO world go round. If you have the wrong keywords, you're going to get the wrong traffic. If you have the right keywords, you're absolutely going to get the right traffic, and that's what we want more of as business owners. You need to know what people are typing into this Google box in order to find you. It's also helpful to know what people are typing into this box in order to find your competitors and the category and the products and services that you offer. And I'm going to share with you some tools on how to actually do this in just a moment. But let me share first this example. This is the site of a hypnotherapist that I was doing some consulting with last fall, and his site is beautiful. You can tell he's invested some money into this site. He even invested a little bit of money into some SEO. And John is his name. So I said, John, tell me what it is that you do. What's your flavor of hypnotherapy? And he said, cool, Katherine, let's go to the hypnotherapy applications page. That was the first moment I cringed. What the hell is a hypnotherapy application? Is he going to help me fill out a job for a job application form or something? Like, what is, anyway, so I let it slide. Didn't say anything. And I said, cool, you do a whole bunch of things. Which ones are your most popular services? And he said, at this point in time, it said smoking cessation. Now, since we've consulted together, he's changed it to stop smoking. Fantastic. But I said, okay, John, second cringe moment. What the hell is smoking cessation? And I knew what it is in the back of my mind. I knew because in high school, let me straighten my tie here. In high school, I was the head of the anti-tobacco task force, which is a really fancy name of just going into 5th and 6th grade classes and telling them the dangers of smoking, which really meant I got out of class and I was all for that. So I knew what it was. John knows what it is. That's how he might refer to it if he's talking with his industry peers and colleagues and maybe at some training events and things like that. But I told John, I said, hey, I venture to guess that literally nobody is searching for a smoking cessation. And he said, not true. That's what we all call it. And I pulled up a tool and I said, look, 8 times more people are searching how to stop smoking. In other words, John was missing out on potentially 8 times more clients just because he had the wrong keywords on his website. In the LA area, there was 8 times more people he could help, which is the whole reason he got into hypnotherapy in the first place, is to have massive impact. It's the whole reason you're getting into the business you're getting into, is you want a high level of impact. And the right keywords are going to get you there. The wrong keywords, man, they're just going to hurt your performance. Okay, so what are the right keywords for your business? Well, there's a few criteria that I like to go by. The right keywords are keywords that are highly relevant to the thing that you do, the business that you have, the product that you sell. That's pretty intuitive, but I'm going to show you here in just a moment an example of some keywords that would be easy to get wrapped into, but they're not quite the right ones for a business. Criteria number 2, it uses the customer's language versus industry jargon. That's the example we just shared with John, the hypnotherapist in LA. Number 3, keywords that are actually getting searched. Of course, we need to focus on keywords that are actually getting searched, but I bring this up because I can't tell you the number of times in my 17 years I've had the best keyword idea in the entire world, and I run it through one of my tools, and 0 people a month are searching it. There's no value in having a great keyword idea if nobody's actually going to search it and come to your website for it. And then number 4, usually keywords are more specific, the right keywords rather, are more specific than they are general. Okay, now let me share with you an example of what a good keyword is versus a really terrible keyword. Now, I'm pushing 40. I'm going to be 40 in just a few months here. And as I get older, my body likes to have a whole lot less fun than it used to. And what this means for me is my body doesn't like gluten and dairy like it used to. Now, pizza is one of my favorite things in the whole world, and unfortunately, I just can't eat it anymore. So instead of being able to eat it, I just like to torture myself with examples in workshops like these. So if I owned a pizza restaurant in Flagstaff, this might be a really great keyword for me. Pizza in Flagstaff, right? Very straightforward. It's exactly what I do. It's in the customer's language, and it's actually getting searched. I ran this through one of my tools, and 500 people a month at least are searching this keyword. What might be a really terrible keyword is something like pizza recipe or how to make a pizza. This is a really terrible keyword because it's not what I do. It's not what I offer. Here's the thing though, it's very attractive to go with these slightly less relevant keywords because 30,000 people a month are searching this one versus 500 people a month that are searching pizza in Flagstaff. And if I'm an entrepreneur, my mind's probably working along the lines of, yeah, of course I want to get in front of 30,000 people instead of 500 people, but it's 30,000 of the wrong people, which means when they come to my website, they're not going to have a great experience. They're not going to find what they're looking for. And when people come to my site over time and they have enough bad experiences, Google's going to be able to know that. And because they need to protect the quality of their product, they're going to drop me in the SEO rankings, and I'm going to get a whole lot less traffic. And that is just a recipe for disaster. Okay, so that's an example of a great keyword versus a really terrible keyword. So the next question becomes then, how do you even find what those right keywords are for your business? Now, if we were sitting together in a room, I'd actually love to pull up a chair next to you and walk you through this. So because we can't do that, take some good notes here. You're going to be able to do this after we spend our time together. What you're going to want to do first is take 60 seconds, grab a pen, some paper, and you're just going to do a brain dump. And what you're dumping out on this paper is all those keyword ideas that you can possibly come up with in about 60 seconds. All the crazy keyword ideas, all the really good ones, all the ones that you know people are searching because maybe they've told you that. And as you're doing this, put a star by your top 3 favorites. These are going to be the ones that feel resonant to you. They're the ones that I get a cool butterfly feeling in my stomach when I'm onto something. Some people get, the goosebumps on their arms or the tingly on their spine. Whatever that is for you, when you feel that, put a star by those. The ones that you starred, we're going to go use here in step number 2. Step number 2, you're going to go to a keyword research tool. Now, my preference is a tool called the Moz Keyword Explorer. I have no affiliation to this company. It's just what I've fallen in love with over my 17-year career. There's other really awesome ones out there. Ubersuggest. If you do run Google Ads has a pretty good keyword tool. But for today's sake, we're going to use Moz. So you're going to go to moz.com/explorer, and you're going to create a free account. Here, that's the best part, is this isn't going to cost you any money. When you do that, and I'll show you here in the next slide an actual screenshot of this, but when you do it, you're going to plug your top keyword idea into Moz. And what Moz is going to do is spit back literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of closely relevant keyword ideas. This is the gold that we're mining for here when we're doing keyword research. So what are all those keyword ideas I didn't already think about? Moz is going to tell you that. And here's what Moz looks like once you go there and you start to work on it. So at the very top of the Moz screen is where you're going to put your keyword. You're going to click the blue magnifying glass, and you're going to pretty much ignore everything else on this page. It is a whole lot of really geeky, really cool SEO metrics that I love to learn about and I love to know. You don't need to know about those for today's sake. And instead, what you do need to care about is this one final link on the page called See All Suggestions. You're going to click that, and that's going to take you to those hundreds and hundreds of keyword lists. And you're going to be able to filter through that and figure out what's relevant for your business based on the 4 criteria we talked about. And you're going to be able to delete the ones that are not relevant for you. Okay. So now that you've done your keyword research, and congratulations, by the way, that's a huge step, but all that we have at this point in time is knowledge. We don't really have anything that's going to jumpstart our SEO quite yet. We need to go put this knowledge into action. This is step number 2. We're going to go put these keywords into the content of our website. This one is so critically important. Where exactly do we go put those right keywords? Well, One of the most important places you need to put these keywords is what's called your page title. Of the 240 different factors in the Google algorithm, Google has said, hey, page titles are the #1 most important factor. And I'll show you what a page title here is in just a moment, but it's literally the title of your page. The reason Google puts so much importance on it is because it's kind of clue #1 for Google that the content on your page is about XYZ. If you have a really terrible page title, you're working pretty hard to confuse Google. And Google doesn't like that. They're just not going to spend that much time on your site to try to figure it out. And they're going to go on to the next one and rank whoever does give them a strong signal, rank them above you. Okay, so page titles, we get that they're really important, but what the heck are page titles? They show up on the web in two places. They become the blue link that somebody clicks when they do a Google search. That's place #1. Place #2 is it's literally the title of a page. Now I'm using a pizza, we're going to keep rolling on our pizza example here. This website that I'm taking a look at is Pizzikletta. It's a really popular pizza restaurant here in Flagstaff, Arizona. Amazing pizza when I used to be able to eat it. Amazing stuff, but their SEO is terrible. And at some point I should probably help them, but then I lose my example, so it's a little bit of a double-edged sword for me. Okay, let me show you what a really great page title is and what a really terrible page title is. So we're going to keep rolling with Pizzikletta, these poor people. This is their page title. It says Pizzikletta, Flagstaff's wood-fired pizza. Now, it's not the worst that I've ever seen in the world, but there's a few things wrong with it. They're telling Google that the most important thing that they want to rank for is Pizzikletta. Because they put that first in their page title, they're saying, hey, Google, whenever somebody searches Pizzikletta, show me for that. Which makes sense. That's who they are. But here's the thing. It's in their domain name. It's in their business name. If they're members of the Chamber of Commerce, they've listed it there. Google has all these other places it can pull from to know that you are your company name. We don't want to use that precious real estate to tell Google we are our company. Google's already going to know that. Instead, we want to use that precious real estate to tell Google about the things they might not know about our business. So they're telling Google the most important thing is their brand name. That's great, but Google's already going to know that. It's also not what we call a keyword-rich page title. This means they don't have a lot of really good keywords in there. They have Flagstaff, they have pizza, that's okay. But they also have 70 characters to work with. And because they're not using all 70, they're missing out on some keyword opportunities. Now here's a much better page title. This says, Best Pizza in Flagstaff, Pizzikletta, Flagstaff's wood-fired pizza favorite. Here's why this one is so much stronger. We put the primary keyword first. The primary keyword is the most important thing that we want to show up for. So in the case of this example, it's Best Pizza in Flagstaff, and I would even argue it's just pizza in Flagstaff. We put that first, and we put the company name after that, right? So now we're telling Google, hey, show us for Best Pizza in Flagstaff, which I guarantee is getting searched way more times than Pizzikletta. So just that one change alone is going to boost up our SEO traffic. We also were able to work in some variations of the keywords. Because we used the full 70 characters, we were able to stick, so we've got Best Pizza, we've got Flagstaff, we've got Flagstaff's wood-fired pizza favorite. All those are keyword variations. We're sending a really strong signal to Google that not only are we about pizza, but we're also about some really good pizza, right? And then we've got our branding towards the middle of the end, Pizzikletta. And then finally, we are giving users a compelling reason to click. This is just good marketing. This isn't a digital marketing tactic. This is just a good marketing tactic. We need to kind of toot our own horn about what our competitive advantage is. And in the case of Pizzikletta, they're one of the only places in town that does wood-fired pizza. So we put that in our page title because that's interesting. That stands out among all the other dozens and dozens of pizza shops in Flagstaff. Okay, makes sense so far? All right, that is step 2. This seems rather simple maybe to you. I cannot emphasize the importance of finding those right keywords and actually doing something with them. And in this case, we're going to optimize our page titles. Now, this is a simple 3-step formula, so I'm not going to tell you all the other places that you could go put your keywords, but just as a kind of bonus here, bonus tip here, you're going to want to put your keywords in the actual text of your web pages. So if your homepage is all about topic XYZ, make sure it says topic XYZ based on your keyword research that you did in step 1. Okay, let's keep going. So far we've talked about keywords. What are those right keywords for your business? I taught you how to do some keyword research. Step 2, we actually did something with this knowledge. We put it into action. That's optimizing your content, specifically your page title. Now step 3, we're going to pour some gas on this fire that we just got burning, this little SEO fire that we just got burning. We're going to dump some fuel on that here with links. Links are important for two reasons. One, it serves just a functional purpose. It's the actual web, right? It's the World Wide Web. It's the web that's created that Google can then go crawl through to find those new pages. That's cool. The cooler thing, though, is that it helps determine how Google should rank a page in its search results. So I mentioned this algorithm a few times. One section of the algorithm has to do with a site's popularity. When one site links to your site, that's essentially a vote for popularity. If we all go back to our high school days, we're voting prom king, prom queen, right? The most popular kids tend to get voted those. Think of your website as the next prom king or prom queen. We need to get a lot of votes to our site. In other words, we need to get a lot of links to our site. So the more links that you have, the more votes that you have, the more popular and the higher the likelihood is that you're going to rank really well on that Google page. Here's the thing with links. I have seen sites do really terribly with keywords. They've done really terribly with their page titles, but because they have a lot of links, they still rank #1 on Google. That's the importance of links. And I've also seen the flip side. They have the best keywords in the world. They have it in all the right places on their site, but they have no links. Google just doesn't think they're that popular and they're not going to rank them that well. Okay, so what are some ideas that we can use to drive links to our website? Before I jump into about 6 ideas that I've got to share with you today, there's a word of caution I do want to share. Never, ever buy links. We've probably gotten those emails, and they're pretty persistent folks, of folks saying something like, hey, for $500, I will go build 50 links for you in the next 30 days and get you to the top of Google. It sounds really attractive, and the truth is it actually does work. But here's the thing, it violates Google's webmaster guidelines. And because it violates their guidelines, and because Google needs to protect the integrity of their product, which we've talked about, Google has the world's geniuses working on its algorithm. It's gonna find that out, and yeah, it might work in the short term, but long term, they're gonna discover that you spammed its system. We call these black hat tactics. It's gonna discover that, and it's gonna kick you out of the search results. And boy, is that just a death sentence for a small business owner. So never go buy links. Instead, here's 6 ideas on ways to go build what we call white hat links. First one of these is just do something that's newsworthy. This is just good marketing, right? Do something that's newsworthy, go toot your horn about it, and get some press coverage. And I'll share with you a tool that actually helps do this kind of at scale. Guest blogging, that's exactly what it sounds like. You're gonna go be a guest post or a guest author on another person's blog because you're a subject matter expert on the thing that you do. And when you write this blog post, you're going to include a link back to your own site and probably some links to some other sites too, but that's going to help build a link for you. Number 3, I love this idea, memberships and associations. This one is one we don't even think about, but almost every single one of us belongs to some type of membership, whether it's a licensing organization, a networking organization like a chamber of commerce. I also belong to a couple digital marketing industry associations. And on every single one of these association websites, we have the opportunity to create our own profile pages. And you better believe, for good SEO, you need to include a link on your profile page that comes back to your own website. Super low-hanging fruit, but a big payoff there. Number 4, industry partners. Who are those folks that you have relationships with that would be willing to link back to you? Is it clients? Is it vendors, distributors, JV partners, affiliates? The list can go on and on. Who are those folks that you have a relationship with already that could link back to you? Or who are those folks that you would love a relationship with? And maybe you host a webinar for them, or you write an article for their newsletter or something like that. And those all can include links back to your website. Number 5, sponsorships. What are those organizations out there that for a small donation are willing to list you on their sponsor page and you get that link back, right? And then number 6, I love this idea, scholarships. You can go create a scholarship fund, get listed on university websites, and create some powerful links back to your site. Now here's the thing with this idea. You don't need to go create a $10,000 scholarship or a $5,000 scholarship or even a $1,000 scholarship. It can be something like $250, $500, whatever makes sense for you. But what you're gonna do is create a page on your website with all the scholarship details, how people can apply, the criteria they need to meet, et cetera, et cetera. Once you create this page, you're gonna reach out to your local universities, and you can even think beyond universities. It can be trade schools, vocational schools, community colleges. Every single one of these has a scholarship database. You're gonna reach out to somebody who manages that database and say, hey, I've got a scholarship I think your folks will be interested in. They're gonna list you, and here's the thing about a link from these types of organizations. University sites and trade schools and community colleges and things like that, they carry a lot of clout in Google's eyes. They are really well-respected organizations. And when you can get a link back from one of these types of domains, man, is that going to ignite your SEO. Now, this is a tactic, scholarships, this is a tactic that was used quite a lot in about the mid-2000s, 2010, 2012, and it became a lot less effective. Because people found it less effective, they stopped doing it, and because they stopped doing it, it's become effective again. So definitely some food for thought there. Now, my two favorite are these top two, PR types of links and guest blogging. Let's dive just a little bit deeper here. We're going to go into the PR types of links. Why do we want to do these? Well, obviously, we need to be doing something that's newsworthy for our business in the first place. And when we do that, we can get published in some meaningful press with a link back to our site. Here's a tool that I've found to be pretty valuable in my own experience. This is a tool called Help a Reporter Out, or it's called HARO for short. And what HARO is, it's literally just a marketplace between journalists and subject matter experts. And it connects these two to each other. So me, as the subject matter expert, as the business owner, can go sign up for HARO, and it's completely free to do so. And I'll say, hey, HARO, I'm a subject matter in topics X and Y and Z. And then HARO says, cool, I'm going to email you a few times a day with journalists looking for information, looking for quotes, looking for subject matter experts on those very specific things. I'm going to get these emails, and they look kind of like this. I'm going to be able to filter through them and say, hey, I think I can contribute something to that journalist article. I connect with the journalist, and then I get my link. Now, it's not as simple as that, but it's also not very complicated. So HARO is a wonderful tool. Guest blogging. What is guest blogging? We covered a little bit about it. You're just going to write a blog post that's hosted on somebody else's blog. That's pretty relevant to the industry that you're in, of course. Why would you want to do this? Well, they need content to keep their audience engaged, and they don't always want to be the one creating that content. If you've ever written a blog post, you know that sometimes it can be kind of a pain in the butt. So they're always looking for guest bloggers. You're a subject matter expert on that blog that they need content for, and it's going to get a link back to your site. Now, I have created an action guide that's going to walk you through these 3 steps, and more details on that here in just a moment. In this action guide, you're also going to get a whole script that you can use for this guest blogging tactic here. This script is literally going to have just the things that the placeholders called out where you need to swap in your own information, and that's what you can use to reach out to guest bloggers to get an article written for you. So in order to download that script and the whole action guide, you're going to go to coachkatherinedigital.com/moonshot. Enter your email address, and I'll shoot that action guide and script over to you right away. Okay, let's recap what we've talked about because we've covered a lot of ground. And by the way, I'm so proud of you for sticking with me so far. We have covered a lot of ground in a topic that can be overwhelming, and hopefully you found it really actionable and down to the ground and approachable for you. So let's quickly recap what we need to be doing to grow our businesses. First of all, we need to find what our keywords are, and we need to go find those right keywords for our business. You can do that with a tool like Moz. You can do that with a tool like Ubersuggest, Google Ads tool. There's tons of great free ones out there. Point being is use some kind of tool to find out what those right keywords are for you and run them through our filter, run them through our 4 criteria that we had talked about. Number 2, you need to go do something with this knowledge. It's not enough just to know what your keywords are. You need to actually go put those keywords onto your website. And then step 2, we talked about your page titles and how critically important your page titles are, right? Go optimize your page titles. We use the Pizzicletta example of what a really terrible page title is and what a really good one is. Go update your page titles. And here's the cool thing. It'll take you maybe less than 10 minutes to actually go do this, believe it or not. You don't need to be a web developer. You don't need to be a designer. You don't need to know HTML. It's actually a very simple thing. You can just do a quick Google search for, if your site's built on Squarespace, you could just do how to update page title, Squarespace, or how to update a page title, WordPress, or whatever platform your site's built on. There's millions of support articles that are very good to actually walk you through how to do this. All said and done, it's going to take you 10 minutes or less, and it's going to have a huge payoff. Now, with these 2 steps, we just got this awesome little SEO fire burning, right? Step number 3 is getting those links. That's really going to ignite and jumpstart your SEO traffic. What are those? We went through 6 ideas, but the sky's the limit. What are all those other ways that you could go build links? The number 1 way to not build links, though, what did we say? Do not go buy them. Please, please, please do not go buy them. Now, I can't control what you do and what you don't do, but that's just my very strong word of caution, and I have seen it really hurt people, so don't fall for it. Okay, so those are our 3 steps. Hopefully, you have learned quite a bit. Hopefully you're able to take some action on this stuff. Now, we did cover quite a bit of ground, so I did create this action guide I just mentioned. You can download this at coachkatherinedigital.com/moonshot, and it's going to walk you through everything we just talked about. And it's meant to really be a reference guide that you can use over and over and over, and eventually it's something you can hand off to your team as your teams grow and let them do that. Really meant to empower you to do some amazing digital marketing so that you can create that consistent, reliable, long-term web traffic and therefore revenue that we all need. So I look forward to seeing you over at coachkatherinedigital.com/moonshot to download this action guide. And I'm also on social media everywhere as Coach Katherine Digital. So I'd love to stay in touch with you. Let me know how I can help you as you continue to grow your business. And let me know how it's going for you as you implement these 3 steps. Okay, that's what I have for you today. I wish you the best of success. I'm so looking forward to your future. Take care. Be well.
When was the last time you thought, if she can do it, I can do it? And what if I told you, you're right, you can do it? Hi, I'm Valerie Caro. I'm so grateful for all the support from coaches, friends, clients, and mentors that I've received throughout my life and my career. So many people have contributed to my successful career and the 34 years growing my real estate company, Flagstaff Top Producers Real Estate, right here in Flagstaff. That's why we're so proud to be a sponsor of Moonshot's We Mean Business, a monthly coffee meetup supporting women business leaders and entrepreneurs in Northern Arizona, now delivered virtually. Following this morning's collection of entrepreneur workshops, you'll be able to join us live online for December's We Mean Business. To join, click the link on the Moonshot website following this morning's workshop. We estimate a start time of 10:30 a.m. All right, now let's get started with today's lineup.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Pierotti. We're going to talk a little bit about licensing today, but first I wanted to give you a little bit of my background. So I am currently the Interim Executive Director of the Fabric Foundation, but I started my career in the music business working for Universal Music. Fast forward a little bit, I worked for Hot Topic headquarters. That was my introduction into licensing. And my first memory of getting involved in licensing was actually attending a screening of Harry Potter before the final edits were made, looking for ideas for creating licensed product. So from there, we got involved in a lot of licensing, and Hot Topic is one of the industry leaders in licensing today. Fast forward a little bit more, I worked for Band Merch doing license and entertainment property merchandising. And from there, I actually went to work with Jonathan and Drew Scott from Property Brothers, building out their Scott Living brand. From there, went to Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation and had the privilege and honor of managing Mr. Wright's intellectual property catalog, which was quite vast. And today, I'm here to talk to you about licensing. So getting started, we want to talk about protecting your work, your creative work that you've developed, and trademarking. So what we want to do initially is trademark what you have created so that you can monetize it in different ways. So the things that you can trademark are your name, logo, and slogan. Other things you can do are copywriting, and copywriting applies to original, literary, dramatic, musical, and artistic works. So copywriting is a protection that generally lasts 70 years. There's always some exceptions to every rule. There's a lot of exceptions in copywriting. A work for hire is a copyright that persists for 120 years after its creation or 95 years after its publication, whichever is shorter. So works created before 1978, copyright duration rules are more complex, and that involves a lot more legal study that we're not going to get into today. But it's also good to know that a patent applies to an invention or a tangible idea. So we're talking about technical processes, machines, manufactured goods, chemical formulas. There's a utility patent and there's a design patent. So a utility patent generally protects the way an article is used and works, and it usually lasts around 20 years. A design patent talks about how something looks. So utility is how it works, design is how it looks. A trade secret applies to a practice or a process that's not known outside of a company. So the fact that it is a secret makes it special, and that's what we're protecting with trade secrets. So why should you trademark? It's important to show that you have ownership of your intellectual property, and that's why we need to trademark things. So we're showing a presumption of validity and ownership. So this is important if you have to deal with an infringement case, and it also makes it effective for you to police your brand in multiple ways, especially with an Amazon brand registry. So you have to have something trademarked in order to get into that process to protect your brand. And it also deters folks who have similar branding from doing something too similar to what you're doing. So what is similarity? Similarity is very subjective, and there's a lot of subjectivity around the legal component of this, because what's confusing to you may not be confusing to me, and vice versa. So what is confusingly similar and what is substantially similar? Again, kind of subjective. So it's really about preventing consumer confusion. So if there's the possibility of creating confusion in the marketplace, this is what we want to stop from happening. So the USPTO, the trademark office, they're there to make sure that this kind of stuff doesn't happen. So if two marks are too similar and there's no control, then that's when we get into legal problems. So the owner that holds the earliest use and trademark for the right is left to defend the mark. But it's important that you show a beginning time frame for use. So what do we go through? What process do we go through to actually trademark something? So you can do it yourself. You can do it on LegalZoom. You'll be dealing with the USPTO. It takes about 3 to 6 months. And again, it's really important to note the first date of use. And you actually have to trademark by country. It's much easier and much cheaper to do it that way than getting global trademarks. So, USPTO, what tools do they have? They have a trademark search system, and they have a document retrieval system. So these are two things that you can access. So what symbols do we need to use, and when do we need to use them? So using the R symbol, little circle with the R in it, we want to only use that after federal registration. So you have to have applied for it, and you have to have received the trademark registration from the U.S. government. Very important. So using it without that can actually get you denied for your trademark application. So the TM and the SM symbols, the trademark, are for things like goods and clothing, and a service mark is for things like consulting. So you can use both of these before you file a trademark application, or during the process. You won't get in trouble for that. So let's talk a little bit about intellectual property law. So we'll go through the basics, and then I'll give you some resources to use. So the basics, we want to talk about patents. So a patent provides the inventor a legal right to protect your invention, be it a product, design, or process related to fashion designs, is one use for them. And by securing a patent on a novel invention, the inventor can safeguard their intellectual property. So some examples of this again is from the fashion world, but technology used to manufacture Crocs shoes, that's proprietary. Wrinkle-free fabrics, UV filtering textiles, fire and water repellent textiles. So there's a specific technology used to create these things, therefore you can patent them. And what you can do with your patent once you own it is license it, and we'll talk about that. So an artistic creation cannot be patented, very important to know. So then you want to go back and look at copyright, right? So fashion designers usually don't opt to protect under patent law for a variety of reasons. Again, a lot of legalese that we won't get into today. But more expensive and time-consuming to obtain a patent than a copyright or a trademark. So trademark law protects a business's commercial identity or brand by discouraging other businesses from adopting a name or logo that is confusingly similar. Again, we're talking about what's confusing and to whom, so there's some subjectivity to this. Confusingly similar to an existing trademark. And trademarks are the most widely used means by which fashion brands, creative brands in general, protect themselves in the U.S. So why doesn't copyright law apply to fashion in the United States? And we're using a lot of fashion references again because this applies to quite a few different types of creative businesses. So separability is a prerequisite for a garment or other useful article to be protected by U.S. copyright law. So that is, can you take certain components out of it and still use it in the way which it was intended, and can you tell what the thing is that you designed or taking pieces out of it going to change the functionality of it or the recognition of it. So in the European Union, they have a lot more history to their fashion industry than the U.S. And that also applies to a lot of other industries as well, again, because we're looking at creative industries. So the EU has registered and unregistered community design rights protected to protect garments and accessories as a whole. So we have France pioneering designs back in the 1600s, so we have a lot more history to work with there. So that if you're looking for case studies, this is a good place to look. So unsuccessful proposed changes to U.S. copyright laws. There have been a lot of attempts to make changes to this in the States. It's generally just not a lot of movement in that area. So some legal precedent. This is a good case to look at, again, if you're looking for some precedent to go back and reference for legal purposes. So the Supreme Court actually clarified standards for separability. It's really, again, about protecting the original design and noting use of that design. So can you protect something like a single color? And this is an interesting case study. So the Lanham Act, and there are two actually cases to go back and look at if you want to learn a little bit more about that, the Christian Louboutin case and the YSL case from 2008 and 2011. So again, this is Louboutin talking about the red sole. Can they trademark the red sole? That's what a lot of people consider a huge part of that brand. So are they able to protect that? And that's what that case is about. So another thing to talk about is trade dress. So trade dress usually refers to product packaging. And the courts recently extended the definition to be an essential component of a design of fashion apparel. So if you have a creative business and you're packaging it in a certain way, trade dress can be considered a big part of that. So Adidas, we have the three stripes, Burberry, and their particular tartan plaid. These are things that have been so closely associated with these brands that is considered part of their trade dress. So let's talk a little bit about licensing fundamentals and what we can do within the licensing industry to monetize the intellectual property that we just talked about protecting in various ways. And the reason you want to protect it is so that you can monetize it. So what is licensing? So licensing, generally speaking, is when an IP owner, you're then considered the licensor, has granted another party, which we consider the licensee, the use of their IP in exchange for something, usually money, but it could be other considerations. If someone who could be a licensor doesn't have a license to use intellectual property, it's considered infringement. So why should you license? So as a licensor, as an intellectual property owner, high return, minimal risk. So basically, you're not, as the licensor, taking a lot of financial risk to create product, to test things in the marketplace, to go through the product development process. That risk usually falls to the licensee. And you're reducing the cost of product development, you're maximizing your brand exposure, you have another alternative revenue source from however else you're monetizing your brand. And from a distribution standpoint, you have different retailers in different territories that you can get into because you have a relationship with a licensee. So a licensee, why would you want to actually participate in licensing as a manufacturer? You would increase your credibility in the marketplace by associating yourself with a high recognition brand. You have a lower cost of going to market than if you're building a brand from scratch. And you would increase the appeal to retail buyers. So being associated with a brand that's being licensed to you might get you in front of a buyer that might not otherwise talk to you, or get you into a retailer that might not otherwise talk to you. And it gives the smaller companies the ability to compete against larger companies. So again, we're just looking at a larger presence in the marketplace as a manufacturer, as a licensee. So where did licensing come from? We want to figure out what the precedent was for all this stuff that we're about to talk about. We'll look at some early occurrences in the industry, but we'll start in the Middle Ages. So the churches actually endorsed tax collectors to give them credibility with the people from whom they were collecting tax. So they were able to identify themselves as being associated with the church in a significant way, which gave them more credibility. So some early pioneers beyond the Middle Ages, we'll go into the 1800s. Bush was the first product that was actually licensed, was a wine key. So we're looking at a corkscrew, a bottle opener, that type of thing. And the manufacturer of the wine keys actually realized that if they put the Bush logo on the wine keys, they might sell more. So Bush makes some money, they sell more wine keys, everybody's happy. And we can go into some different industries now. Now this is merchandising. Now we'll talk about publishing. So Beatrix Potter wrote Peter Rabbit, and she actually had she owns that IP, right? She protected herself. She had a publishing deal that she struck up in 1902 to publish her story in a broader and more meaningful way. We can look at the New York Herald. There was a cartoonist for the New York Herald who drew Buster Brown. And they actually licensed Buster Brown to Brown Shoe Company in 1904, sold more shoes, New York Herald makes a little money, everybody's happy. So you've probably heard of teddy bears. Where that came from was actually a story about Theodore Roosevelt, who went bear hunting and actually wasn't very fruitful in his bear hunt that day, but did come across an older bear towards the end of the day and actually asked the guide to put him out of his misery. And that story about how Teddy Roosevelt was sympathetic to the bear got a lot of press attention. So the Ideal Novelty Toy Company actually contacted Teddy Roosevelt and said they wanted to make bears and call them teddy bears to commemorate that story. So the royalties from that program actually supported national parks. So here we have the first instance of a nonprofit benefiting from a licensing deal. And then we can talk about the Girl Scouts, who have applied their name through various licensing relationships to over 1,800 products by 1912. So let's look at some trailblazers in the industry. We can go back to 1932 when Disney actually hired Kay Kamen, who's considered the father of modern licensing. And his strategic approach to licensing, very important, still applies today, is that licensing is meant to be mutually beneficial. So the manufacturer, the licensee, benefits because they're selling more product. The licensor benefits for all of the reasons that we talked about, but also monetary benefits. So by 1935, so we have 3 years here, from when he's hired to 1935, more than 1,000 products were made using Disney IP. And even in the middle of the Depression, the General Foods folks paid $1 million to Disney to be able to have a Mickey Mouse cutout on the back of a box. Another instance of Disney's success is actually helping Ingersoll Waterbury out of bankruptcy. And through a watch deal at Macy's in New York, they sold 11,000 watches in one day. And now we have, in 2019, Disney Consumer Products selling $54.7 billion, and they consistently rank in the top 3 of consumer products in the licensing world. So we have another industry trailblazer, Frank Lloyd Wright, who actually launched his own licensing program in 1955. So he ran that program himself for 4 years. Started out with the things that were most closely associated with his work, home goods, so rugs, paint, furniture. And there was actually, in November of 1955, an entire issue of House Beautiful magazine that was dedicated to Frank Lloyd Wright and the launch of his products. So another thing to note about Frank Lloyd Wright is that he had fellows working alongside him most of his life, and the things that they created were considered work for hire. So this is important if you're in a creative industry and you're working for another entity. Do you own the work that you create while you're working for them? That's something you need to make sure of before you go down the road of trying to secure trademarks, copyrights, things like that to do with the work that you create, because your employer most likely owns that work. So in the case of Frank Lloyd Wright, the fellows created designs, surface designs, lots of different designs, architectural designs. The Frank Lloyd Wright estate owns all of that. So two different ways to use the work. We can use it very literally. You can take a surface design, print it on something flat, sell it. That's the easiest way that you can use something that's a creative design. So that's good for giftables, t-shirts, prints, things like that. Replica pieces, anything that's created in a model format, furniture, things like that, you can replicate that. That's pretty literal translation. One arena you can play with there is modifying the size. So for instance, with the Frank Lloyd Wright chair, you can buy a miniature version of it, you can buy a life-size version of it, and now you can buy a actual kid-size version of it. And another use is inspired by. So rather than taking something, like we said, surface design, putting it on something flat, selling it, you can take an element, a design element, and make a repeat pattern out of that. Or you can take the philosophy with which something was designed, apply it to something else, and that can still be considered part of the portfolio and can still be branded that way. So there's a lot of different ways you can play with the intellectual property. So this is an example of a program that I put together for the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation with Crate and Barrel and a company called Epicurean. So obviously Frank Lloyd Wright didn't create dinnerware in his time and kitchenware, but we can take the designs from different things that he's created and use them for another purpose. So another trailblazer in the industry, we're going back to 1977 here with the first Star Wars movie. I could spend 3 hours just talking about Star Wars, but we won't go that deep into it. I'll just highly recommend that if you're interested in licensing or toys or Star Wars, that you take a look at this documentary, The Toys That Made Us. It's the first season, first episode, and it's on Netflix. Highly recommended. Very cool thing to watch. And I put this image on here because I think it's so interesting. They couldn't keep up with production. Initially, they weren't expecting Star Wars to be such a success. So because they couldn't come out with the product soon enough for the holidays, they actually made this early bird certificate package so that you could redeem at a later date for the actual products. And I was lucky enough to have one of those when I was a kid. So that was the beginning of my career in licensing, I guess. So different types of licensing. We have technology and patent licensing, software licensing. I'm sure you've bought software in your lifetime and you had to enter a key, that type of thing. So you've licensed that software from the actual person who created it or company that created it. There's trademark licensing, character licensing. When you start getting into a lot of overseas licensing, especially in China, most of the licensing you see there will be character licensing. We have brand licensing, and then we have ancillary product licensing, which is more commonly referred to as merchandising. So let's talk about types of licensees and types of licensors. There can be lots of entities that participate in this. Types of licensees are manufacturers. So that could be someone who is already manufacturing something and wants to utilize a different creative or a different brand on the product. We can also talk about retailers. So that's called DTR, direct to retail. That's where someone who owns a brand, a licensor, would work directly with a retailer, and the retailer then secures a manufacturer to produce the products specifically for that retailer. And then there's companies like brand agencies. So these are generally the three big ones that you'll hear about in licensing news. But Iconics owns these brands. PVH owns Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger. And then we have ABG that owns things like Sports Illustrated, Barney's, Forever 21. So the different types of licensors, those can be corporations. We talked about Girl Scouts earlier. Those can be artists who own the rights to their work and want to license it for different purposes. We have inventors who can patent something and then license that technology to a manufacturer. And we have the estates. Those are generally, dead celebrities kind of fall in that category. So the estate of that person who then owns all the intellectual property of the person who originally created it can license that out. And then there's agencies that work on behalf of a creative entity or a brand to secure licensing deals for them. So the top 3 global licensors, and these, you won't see a lot of change in these as the years go by, but generally we have Disney, Warner Brothers, and Marvel always topping the entertainment charts, and then we have these folks, and you'll recognize all the ones in sports, so all the jerseys, all the hats, all the things that you see, the products and the merchandise created, those fall into the sports categories. So something as a licensee that you should be asking about your prospective licensors, does that licensor own and control the IP? I could go up to you and say, I want to license Mickey Mouse to you. That doesn't give me any right to do it, right? So we need to make sure that whoever you're talking to actually owns that IP. Are they legally protected for those categories? So you're going to trademark things by product category. You can't produce things outside of those categories that you have the rights to without securing the rights to them first. So the relevance of the brand really should be at the top, because this is what's most important. You have to understand that the reason we would want to put a brand on something is because that product would be more marketable with the brand on it. If no one knows what that brand is, then there's really, the value of the license is very low. If it's a highly recognized brand, the value of the license is going to be higher. So just because something isn't currently relevant doesn't mean it's not going to be relevant, let's say, in a year, or be more relevant in a year. If a movie's coming out, if you go to the licensing expo in Vegas, virtually or physically, you'll see a bunch of movie properties that haven't come out yet, but there's a lot of hype around them, and that's why these licensing deals are being signed on the floor. The audience. Does the audience align with an audience that you're used to talking to? If not, maybe that's not a good fit for you. What's the marketing and promotion support that the licensor is going to provide? Is the onus of the marketing going to be on you as a licensee, or is the licensor going to help you actually promote your products? So what is the brand integrity? Are they spreading themselves too thin? Is the brand getting into categories that are going to affect the brand integrity currently or in the future? We want to know what other competition is in the market. Is there similar IP? Are we doing something that has already been done in some way? Is it going to be less compelling when you release that product? Digital brand assets. So this was really important, especially going back to the Frank Lloyd Wright example. When I started with the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation, we had a ton of things that had been designed but hadn't been digitized. So they had to be recreated in order to use them in a digital capacity. So what has already been done and what needs to be done, and what as a licensee is going to fall on you to do, that's very important. And what's the approval process? So this can be really simple, can be really difficult. Some entities require 3, 4, 5 layers of approvals, and it could take a year or 2 years to get something approved. That's going to drastically change your go-to-market approach, so it's really important that you understand that. So as a licensor, what should you be asking prospective licensees? So what is the desired brand positioning for the manufacturer, for the licensee? Is this meant to be a collaboration? Do they want brand transparency? Or is this more like a white label situation where the manufacturer, the licensee, wouldn't be known to the end consumer? That's something it's really important to address that up front. What existing retail relationships does the licensee already have? Is this licensee perhaps in a retailer that you want to be in, and that's why you're seeking out this deal? If they don't have any retail relationships, how are they going to distribute and market and sell your products? So is that licensee able to drop ship? This is important too. If they just don't have the capability to drop ship, then you're taking yourself out of a lot of potential channels. So a lot of retailers at this point will not necessarily want to take inventory. They'll want the licensee to be able to drop ship once an order is placed. So that reduces the retailer risk. Very important to understand up front if this licensee can actually fulfill something like that. Also important when dealing with Amazon, and lots of other companies are doing drop shipping nowadays. What's the financial health of the company? This is important too. Can this entity afford to pay you your royalties? This is something that you need to know. And so do your homework there. Dun & Bradstreet is a good reference for that. And you just want to make sure that there's no lawsuits pending. And some of that can be addressed in the licensee questionnaire and application before you get into deeper discussions. What other licenses does this entity hold? Are you competing with something too similar to what you're doing? Or have they only taken licenses that are very different from yours, which could be a bad thing because they won't necessarily know how to manage your license? And what's the motivation behind the seeking out of this license? So it's important to understand that if the licensee just wants your license to have in their portfolio to give them credibility, but are going to get their foot in the door, perhaps with a retailer or with a buyer, is that their motivation behind getting the license purely to sell their own product, which they wouldn't have to pay you royalty on? Is that the reason behind it? So I've actually had a licensee tell me out loud that that's the only reason they wanted the license, is to get their foot in the door. Are they active in their requested territories? Just because a licensee wants a global license doesn't mean they should have one. If they want to get into Japan and start pushing their own product in Japan and know that your brand is relevant in Japan, are they just using you for that purpose? On the opposite side of that, do they want global rights to something and they only have distribution in the United States? And then you're giving away territory and probably not going to get a lot of sales in those territories. Follow through, very important. So this is something you should be able to suss out during the initial part of your relationship. Is this prospective licensee able to follow up on requests quickly? Know that this is something that you're going to have to deal with on an ongoing basis. So you want to notice those habits and see if there are any red flags there with follow through at the very beginning. So are there expectations grounded in reality? If you have a licensee that has a if we build it they will come mentality, it's probably not going to work out. Just because you produce product doesn't mean you have an audience for it, doesn't mean you have retail for it, and it still has to be marketed. So there needs to be some level setting with expectations before you get into a relationship. Does this licensee play well with others? You're probably at some point going to have your licensees work together at a retailer or in some kind of synergistic way to put together a larger program. If they're not playing well with the other licensees, it's going to be problematic. Do you want to deal with that? Is it worth it? This is a question you have to ask. So types of properties. These are generally, when you're talking about licensing deals, these are the categories that the properties fall into. So within those product categories, we have these categories and subcategories. Again, these are just kind of industry standards. You can download this presentation and have reference to that. So Contracts 101, let's talk about what's going to happen once you decide you want to do business with a licensor or a licensee, what happens next. So some things that you need to know from a terminology standpoint. The term is the full duration of the contract. And you want to be careful about this. If you're really approaching this relationship as testing the waters, you don't want to get into a 5-year, 10-year commitment. Maybe a 1-year, 2-year term would make more sense. Contract periods can be months or years. Generally, the contract periods are important when you're talking about when a product is going to be launched, because sometimes it takes 18 months to 2 years to actually launch your first product. So you would want to, as you're negotiating the contract, make sure that the royalty, the guaranteed minimum guarantees and the royalty payments, you're not obligated as a licensee to pay a high minimum guarantee in an initial contract period when there's no product in the market. So something to be cautious of there. Net sales, very important in the contract negotiation to understand what net sales are. So net sales are gross sales minus deductions. And what those deductions are very important because that can make or break you. If you, as the licensor, allow your licensee to too many deductions, the net sales can go down pretty low, and then you're getting a royalty on the net sales that are, whereas you could have been getting them on gross sales, but you've allowed all these deductions, so you're making a lot less money. The royalty rate is the percentage of gross or net sales. There are categories. There's a lot of things published that talks about what categories and what ranges fall into what categories. Licensing International is a good resource for that. So if you just Google Licensing International, that's the trade organization that publishes a lot of information around that. Minimum guarantee, very important. The payment due to the licensee regardless of sales. So if you commit to a high minimum guarantee as a licensee, you're going to owe that money regardless of whether you sell 0 products, 1 product, 10,000 products. So be very careful when you're talking about your minimum guarantees. An exclusive license and a non-exclusive license. So an exclusive license is worth more because you have exclusivity either in a category of product or in a specific geographic area, or it could be specific to a sales channel. So you could say, I have exclusivity for online sales, or I have exclusivity for museum sales. It was something really specific like that. So the licensor generally has to understand the value of that and understand that there's going to be a significant advertising spend or marketing commitment associated with getting that exclusive license. And if there's a non-exclusive license being discussed, there needs to be an understanding of why you're getting a non-exclusive license, because you could have someone else, another manufacturer, another licensee, creating very similar product to what you're selling and thus competing with you in the retail marketplace. So applications and agreements, these are just some types of contracts that just know these are going to be part of the process when you're entering into a licensing deal. So if you're starting out as a licensor, you can sign a deal with a licensing agency to represent your brand. And you would want to do this for a couple of reasons. One, if you don't want to handle that in-house, if you don't have the bandwidth, the capability in-house to do that. You'd also want to use a licensing agency if they have a portfolio of brands that are aligned with yours in a significant way to make deals easier to get. A sub-agent agreement would be something in which a licensing agency or your in-house team is then using an agent to do specific deals. So sub-agent agreements, everybody's going to get a piece of the pie, so the more people you have involved, the less money you'll get at the end of the day. Licensing applications, so as a licensor, if a licensee wants to do business with you, they'll have to fill out a licensee application, giving you a little bit of background on their business, why they want the license, can they handle it? That's something that you need to take care of up front. So a deal memo basically extracts the key points from the deal, so you can look at all of those without going through a 10, 20, 30-page contract. Deal memos are generally 1 or 2 pages. You negotiate on those deal points, and then you go into long-form contract. A licensing agreement would be that long-form contract, and then a manufacturer's representative agreement. If, as a licensee, you have someone who is representing your company, like a sales agent, that deals specifically with a particular retailer or category of retailer, that's a manufacturer's representative agreement. And as a licensor, you want to know who's representing your brand in the marketplace, so you want to identify that up front. So some resources for you. This, again, is going to be on the deck if you download it. Licensing International, again, the trade organization that all things licensing are involved in. License Global is a great magazine, as well as an online newsletter that you can get with updates about licensing deals, industry information. LegalZoom will help you through all the trademark and copyright issues. And then we have Fashion Law, which is, again, great case studies for creative industry situations. And then the Intellectual Property Organization has any kind of legal updates around IP. So if you have any questions, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or email me or call or text me, and I'd be happy to have licensing discussions with you. Hope this helps you as you start your journey into licensing. Now, go start something.
Video production services for makers and shakers provided by Moonshot Studios, powered by PDR Digital Media.